It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when Peter and Wilson decided to meet at a coffee to chat. Wilson was restless. For months, he had been trying to learn English, but he felt like he was progressing too slowly. His job was starting to require him to communicate with foreign colleagues, and although he could understand a few words, he didn't feel confident enough to hold a fluent conversation. Hello, welcome to another story. Today, we'll hear about two friends, Peter and Wilson, where Peter gives some practical and effective advice to help Wilson learn English without taking too much time. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help our project reach more people who are on the journey of learning English. Enjoy the lesson. Peter, on the other hand, always seemed comfortable with English. From a young age, he developed a passion for the language and mastered it with ease. Knowing that Peter had achieved fluency in English relatively quickly, Wilson hoped his friend could share some secret, some shortcut that would help him learn faster without wasting too much time. As soon as they sat down, Wilson got straight to the point. Peter, how did you learn English so quickly? I've been trying for months, but it feels like I'm stuck in the same place. Peter gave a sympathetic smile. He knew how frustrating it could be to learn a new language, especially when expectations were high, and results didn't seem to come as quickly as one would like. Wilson, Peter began, stirring his coffee, there's no magic formula, but there are methods that can speed up the process. The most important thing is to adopt a smart and consistent approach. I'll tell you what I did, and I hope these tips will help you. Wilson nodded, eager to hear his friend's strategies. 1. Daily immersion. One of the first things I did was surround myself with English as much as possible. I knew I couldn't learn in a fragmented way, just with a lesson here or there. To really speed up the learning process, I needed to immerse myself in the language. Peter looked at Wilson, making sure he understood the importance of this first tip. For example, I switched the language on my phone, my computer, and all my apps to English. You might think these are small things, but when you force yourself to see and interact with English every day, your brain starts processing the language more naturally. Wilson made a mental note. This was a practical tip he could start implementing right away. Additionally, I exposed myself to English in various forms. I watched movies and series in English, read articles and news, listen to music and podcasts. At first, it's hard to understand everything, but over time, your ear adapts. The key is not to give up when you don't understand something. Keep going. Your brain will adjust. 2. Set small, realistic goals. Peter continued, another important thing is to set goals. But not impossible goals, like be fluent in 3 months. That only leads to frustration. I set small daily and weekly goals for myself. Wilson interrupted, what kind of goals? Well, goals like learning 5 new words a day, or reading a short article in English every morning. Another goal I had was to write at least 1 sentence a day in English. It might seem like little, but when you do it every day, over weeks, you realize you've accumulated a lot of knowledge. Wilson nodded, reflecting on how he had tried to devour large amounts of information in a short time and now saw how counterproductive that was. It's about building the habit. It doesn't matter if you only have 15 minutes a day. If you use those 15 minutes consistently, you'll see surprising results. 3. Study grammar, but don't overdo it. Now, let me tell you something that might sound counterintuitive, Peter said. Grammar is important, but don't spend too much time on it. Wilson laughed, incredulous. But how? Everyone says grammar is the heart of the language. Yes, grammar is important, but here's the thing, a lot of people get stuck studying grammar rules for hours and hours, waiting to be ready to speak perfectly. The problem is, learning English isn't just about grammar. It's about practice and exposure. If you know the basics, you'll be able to communicate. When you focus too much on learning all the rules, you become afraid of making mistakes, and that paralyzes you. Peter paused before continuing. Of course, you need a foundation, so learn the basics of grammar, verb tenses, pronouns, some prepositions. But don't worry about mastering all the complex verb tenses at the beginning. That will come with time. Wilson breathed a sigh of relief because until then, he had thought he needed to be impeccable in grammar before he could start speaking. 4. Practice speaking, even if you make mistakes. Speaking of speaking, Peter resumed, this is one of the most crucial parts of learning any language. You have to speak, even if you make mistakes. Wilson made a face. But I always feel embarrassed when I make mistakes. Peter smiled. That's normal. But here's the trick, no one will care if you make mistakes. People understand that you're learning. And more importantly, every mistake is a learning opportunity. I made ridiculous mistakes when I first started speaking English, but each time someone corrected me or I realized the mistake, I improved. How can I practice if I don't have anyone to speak English with? Wilson asked. Peter had the answer ready. You can use language exchange apps where you talk to native speakers. Another thing I did a lot was talk to myself at home. It sounds funny, but it works. I would narrate my activities in English or describe what I was doing. This helped my mouth get used to the sounds and words in English. 5. The importance of active listening. Another thing that accelerated my learning was active listening, Peter continued. Do you know the difference between just hearing and actively listening? Wilson shook his head. Hearing is passive. You put on a song or a movie and let it play in the background. Active listening, on the other hand, is paying attention to the sounds, words, and phrases. Try to understand the context, even if you don't catch all the words. When I watched movies in English, I didn't just watch for fun. I paused to repeat words or phrases I didn't understand, and then I wrote down what I learned. Wilson realized he had always watched movies in English for entertainment, not as a learning opportunity. He could try this more focused approach. 6. Spaced repetition and the importance of reviewing. Here's a tip that a lot of people overlook, reviewing is essential. You can learn something new today, but if you don't review it, you'll forget it in a few days. Wilson frowned. How do I do that without spending too much time? That's where spaced repetition comes in. There are apps that help you review words and phrases at the right time, before you forget them. I use this method a lot because it ensures that what you learn stays in your long-term memory. 7. Mix learning with personal interests. Something that always helped me learn quickly was mixing English with my personal interests. If you like soccer, for example, read articles in English about soccer, watch player interviews in English. If you like music, try to understand the lyrics of your favorite songs. Wilson looked at Peter, thoughtful. So, I can learn English while watching Premier League games? Exactly, Peter replied, laughing. That's what makes learning fun. When you combine English with things you already enjoy doing, it stops being a boring obligation and becomes part of your daily life. 8. Be patient and don't give up. Peter noticed that Wilson was excited about all the new tips, but he knew the learning process had its ups and downs. Wilson, the last thing I want to say is, be patient. Learning a language is a process. Don't compare yourself to others, and don't expect to be perfect in a short time. The important thing is to make a little progress every day. English, like any skill, gets better the more you practice. And so, the conversation between Peter and Wilson extended for a few more hours. Peter offered practical and valuable advice, and Wilson left the cafe with a new perspective on learning English. He understood that it wasn't about being perfect or learning everything all at once, but about making small daily changes, staying consistent, and Above all, enjoying the process. In the following months, Wilson applied Peter's tips. He started talking to himself in English, watching his favorite shows with English subtitles, and even found a language exchange partner online. Each week, he felt his English improving. The mistakes that once embarrassed him were now seen as part of the process, and he was more motivated than ever. And so, what started as a conversation between friends turned into a true learning journey. Months passed, and Wilson's progress was noticeable. He not only communicated more clearly but had also lost his fear of speaking in public. Peter's immersion method, combined with daily practice and patience, led Wilson to realize that English was no longer an obstacle but had become a tool for new opportunities. One day, as the two met again in that same cafe, Wilson told Peter how much his English conversations at work had improved. "I still make mistakes," Wilson said, "but now I understand what you meant about the process. With each mistake, I learn. And the most interesting thing is that the more I practice, the more naturally the language flows." Peter smiled, pleased. "That's exactly it, Wilson. Learning a language is like running a marathon. You don't have to finish first, but you need to keep running. Progress comes with time, and the most important thing is not to give up." Excited, Wilson began sharing his new learning goals. He planned to take a trip to an English-speaking country next year to test his skills in a fully immersed environment. Peter encouraged him, reminding him that real experience abroad would help solidify everything he had learned. By the end of that afternoon, Wilson realized that the key to learning English, or any new skill, wasn't about shortcuts or quick solutions. Instead, it was about staying consistent, embracing mistakes, and learning with joy. Peter's lessons guided him, not only in learning English but also in how he approached challenges in life. "You taught me much more than just English," said Wilson, raising his coffee cup to toast his friend. "You showed me that learning never stops and that every small effort counts." Peter raised his cup as well, smiling. "And that's the most important thing. It's not just about the destination, but the journey." With that, they toasted, knowing that, just like learning English, life is a continuous journey of learning and growth, a journey that, when approached with patience and dedication, always brings rewarding outcomes. Wilson left that meeting more confident than ever, ready to continue his journey with English and tackle other challenges life would bring. After all, as Peter always said, learning is a marathon, not a sprint. Here's the story of Peter and Wilson on their English learning journey. How's your journey going? Did this video help you in any way? Share your thoughts and insights about the story you just heard and read. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like on the video. See you next time.